Welcome to all of our alumni, faculty, staff, students, guests, and friends of Baylor University to our webinar on COVID-19 impacts on children, hosted by the Louise Herrington School of Nursing. My name is Christy Foyts, and I am the Associate Dean for the online graduate programs at the Louise Herrington School of Nursing. Dr. Jessica Peck is a clinical professor at the Louise Herrington School of Nursing at Baylor University in Dallas, Texas, and president of the National Association of Pediatric Nurse Practitioners, commonly called NAPNAP. She holds active credentials as a pediatric nurse practitioner, a certified nurse educator, and a clinical nurse leader. Dr. Peck is a recognized and published national expert about human trafficking. She served as founding chair of the Alliance for Children in Trafficking, a national campaign of NAPNAP partners for vulnerable youth. Dr. Peck worked with the Office of Trafficking in Persons to help create a set of core competencies for healthcare professionals caring for trafficked individuals. She serves as the lead medical consultant for Unbound Houston and helped pass legislation mandating education for all direct care providers in Texas. As both a nurse practitioner and a mother of 4 teens, she has a special interest in educating and equipping families to promote positive physical, emotional, mental, social, and spiritual health. She is an accomplished author of clinical articles for peer-reviewed journals, a regular contributor for parenting magazines, and a frequent guest on radio and television to promote health of children. Please welcome me today as we say hi and hello to Dr. Jessica Peck.
Thank you so much, Dr. Foyts, for that. If you all give me a minute to share my screen here. Can you see that, Christy? Is everything good? Welcome. Thank you so much for taking your lunch break to spend with me. I really appreciate the time. The most important thing that Christy said in that whole introduction is that I'm a mom of 4 teens. Regardless of anything else, I have 3 teens and 1 teenager who is a little bit between the preteen and teenager age. And so all of you parents out there, I am in this with you, doing all of the online school and the virtual schooling and the social distancing, and the teenagers want to be with their friends and all of those kinds of things. I'm right there with you. So what I'm going to talk to you about is kind of, you can't open the news. You can't talk on any social media forum without people talking about how is this impacting our kids? How is this impacting my kids? So I'm going to give you an overview as both a pediatric nurse practitioner and as a mom of how is this impacting children. We're going to go over some things that are a little scary, a little bit, but I want you to know that we have a really unique opportunity here because teen brains, children's brains don't fully finish developing until they're 21 years old. So that probably is answering a lot of questions for you right now, even as we speak. But their brains are resilient. And so if we can teach them resilience, if we can help them respond to stress in healthy ways, then their brain is elastic and it bounces back. And so we have an opportunity as parents and educators and caregivers to raise and influence perhaps the most resilient generation that our country has ever seen. And that is really exciting. And so through all of these things, we're going to, yes, navigate some difficult things our kids are going through, but overall, I want you to leave feeling engaged and equipped and empowered to be able to make a difference in the life of your child. So I'm going to start on a personal note here. This is my oldest daughter, Shelby. She is graduating from high school this year. A shameless mom brag. She is valedictorian, so I'm very proud of her for that. But throughout all of this, she and I were talking not too long ago, and she said, Mom, everything you've been telling me that's going to happen for 18 years is not going to happen. Nothing is happening like you said it would. There is no SAT. They canceled that. The way that I'm going to college, we were going to do these college visits. That's different. Every prom is definitely different with social distancing and masks and things like that. And everything that I've kind of told her is really different. And we're having to adapt in the moment. And so I've really been, thoughtful about that and thinking about how is this going to change my approach to parenting. But looking at the impacts that have been on children and their families, we see disruptions at school. Some children are not back in school. Some are in virtual school. Some are in online school. Some are in in-person school. And I want to say to all the parents out there, if you chose online school, you made the right choice. If you chose in-person school, you made the right choice. Everybody has different circumstances and different needs for their family. And so it's okay that we are having an individualized approach. We're seeing economic stresses from parents who have lost their jobs or families who have lost income. We're seeing home disruptions because now all of a sudden parents are working from home and we're having all the fun that is Zoom calls with homeschooling going on in the next room and all kinds of disruptions. We're seeing disruptions of social norms. Before last year, no kindergartner and most adults didn't know the phrase social distancing or physical distancing or non-pharmaceutical interventions or those kinds of things. But now we have, even kindergartners who will go to the grocery store and they know to stop on the little red circle on the floor or to keep 6 feet apart. We've had children who can't see their elderly relatives. They've had to just see them through technology, through FaceTime, and through the internet, which is difficult. We've had difficulties in access to care. How many of you have tried to get an appointment? And if you don't have COVID, then a lot of things are disrupted, especially for children with chronic illness or chronic health needs. It's been very difficult to access care. When we do access care, it looks a lot different. The provider that you usually see with a smiling face may come in, in an astronaut suit and look totally different and feel different. And the waiting room's closed. And you're having to wait in the car. And we have new vocabulary like pandemic and and all of the social distancing and things that go along with that. So really, our children's world has changed so much. So what are the children seeing? They are seeing conversations about racism that are in our homes, on social media, at school, on the news that we turn on at night. They're seeing violence spill out across the country. I know the day that we had the Capitol riots, I went to pick up my 4 children who are in in-person school. They, from 6th grade up until 12th grade, they already all knew about it, had seen images shared on social media. We have political turmoil. I'm sure everyone has social media that is just a pleasantry of, civil discourse. No, we have political turmoil. We have heated opinions on both sides. And even not too long ago, my husband and I were having a heated discussion, not in any way conflicting with each other. We were just passionate about what we were talking about. But my youngest son interpreted it as fighting. And he said, "Why are you fighting?" We said, "We're not fighting." But we were talking about politics, guilty. We see health disparities, and especially in the wake of COVID-19, we see people of color that are disproportionately impacted. People that don't have the same resources or access are having higher morbidity and mortality, death and illness from COVID-19. We see kids that are afraid and families that are afraid. Kids are afraid of what is it going to look like when I go to college? What is it going to look like when I go to high school? And most of all, kids, every kid in the whole world has experienced some sort of loss. Now, some losses have been minor, like a favorite place to eat, or a favorite park to go to, or being able to go to baseball games. But other losses have been more intense and more serious. Some kids have lost, their families have lost their job. Some have lost their lives, lost their loved ones, seen people die related to COVID. Some have lost access to their grandparents. Some have lost their after school activities or their sports that was really wrapped up in their identity. And I think it's really important for us to just acknowledge that loss and to think about it, and even to sit down as a family and think about what have we lost in this, and to grieve that, because that's a natural thing to grieve. One of my favorite quotes is by Fred Rogers. I am a Gen X kid, grew up on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and you probably have heard this in the news, but look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. And as we go through, I want you to know that I have been so inspired by helpers across the country who are meeting and engaging with the challenges that are set ahead of us. And so I'm going to introduce you to some of them and some resources along the way. But this is just a great thing to tell your kids to look for the helpers when they're seeing, even in the Capitol riots, for example, my son found a picture of someone picking up trash and helping. And so there's always going to be someone helping, and we have to look for that. It's really important to start conversations. If you think, yeah, we've been kind of talking about this as as a family, and we've been talking to our kids about it, but a lot of times it's hard to talk about it. Like, how do you start a conversation about, well, what do you think about racism? That can be really awkward and difficult. But these questions that I have right here are good for really pretty much any age, that you can adapt for any age group. Anytime something happens on the news, something scary, something concerning, or something happens in your family, maybe somebody goes to the hospital, has testing, you can just say, how are you feeling about what happened today? And many times they'll tell you, how do you think this impacts you? And especially for older kids, they're going to tell you exactly how they think it impacts them. And I guarantee you that you'll be surprised at some of the things that they think about, how it impacts them. How can I help support you and make you feel safe? A lot of times saying, do you feel safe online? Do you feel safe at school? Sometimes they may say, no, I don't feel safe because, maybe they don't feel safe because people aren't um, practicing social distancing like they feel like they're supposed to. We have to remember school age kids are very legalistic and they are very concrete thinkers. So if they're supposed to be following the rules, that can be very distressing for a kid that sees people not following the rules. And what do you think you can do to be a positive influence? What can you do in this situation? It's amazing how we think that we have to come up with this big solution to save the world, but small things can really help. So, for example, for Valentine's Day, my boys are 11 and 13. They made Valentines for widows that we knew that didn't have anything for Valentine's Day. And I'll tell you, they had so many giggles about that. They really felt, kind of silly, honestly, making Valentines, but it made them laugh and it really made those recipients' day. And so just sometimes little things like checking on a neighbor are really big things to them. Let's talk a little bit about mental health and how that's impacted children. Before COVID-19, there were over 8 million children ages 3 to 17 years that had a recognized mental health disorder. 1 in 3 high school students in 2019 said they felt sad or hopeless most of the time. And half of all diagnosed mental health conditions, they occur by age 14, but more than half of those most of those go unrecognized until later in adulthood. And so we're seeing post pandemic mental health issues among children are skyrocketing. We're seeing more self harm. We're seeing more kids come to the emergency room in acute crisis. And really, undiagnosed and untreated mental health conditions increase the risk of developing cardiovascular disease, substance use disorders, and other things that you wouldn't even imagine. So it's really important we recognize it quickly. Mental health problems can look like a lot of different things. They can be all of these things here on the screen, which I'll let you read, a lot of different things. Um, but what I see a lot of times, what mental health looks like, it looks like physical illness. So I see kids come in and they say they're having trouble sleeping, they're having stomach aches, they're having shakes, they're having headaches, they just don't feel right. And usually what I see is the parents come in. First of all, now they're concerned about COVID. They want to make sure their child doesn't have COVID-19. But then after that, they think it's a blood sugar issue, or they may think that, it's migraines, or that it's a stomach issue, especially if they have a family history of that, or maybe it's mono because they're really fatigued. And ruling out those physical things is really important. But I find that with some questioning, and there's some tools that we have as healthcare providers to test for that and to look at that, a lot of times that is what mental health looks like. You've heard the phrase depression hurts. Depression causes real pain. And so a lot of times we stigmatize that and say, oh, it's not really pain, it's depression. No, there is pain associated with depression. It's the fourth leading cause of disability and illness among teens aged 15 to 19 years. That is really a lot, and it impacts approximately 11% of all teens. So, they usually have learned patterns of harmful thinking or a history of abuse. But again, it feels like a physical illness. So teens may feel like giving up and not trying, or pulling away from situations that take energy to pretend things are normal. And their tendency is to hide, but that only makes things worse. And same with anxiety, conversely. Anxiety is something all of us have experienced at one time or another. Think about that time when you were really scared. Was that when you lost your child in the mall for that minute, or, when they got hurt, or, something happened that made you really scared. And you know how that feeling is. Your pulse races and you feel like your pulse is in your neck and your body is running like crazy. Well, That's what something anxiety feels like. And a lot of times with anxiety, the questions that we start asking are, what are you anxious about? But the thing with anxiety is sometimes it's our brain tricking us to be anxious when there's really nothing prompting us to be anxious. So that's frustrating for kids because they think, I don't know. I don't know what's making me anxious. I just feel anxious. And then the parents get frustrated, and then the kid gets frustrated because they can't really explain what's going on. There are 5 general categories of anxiety. So this can be generalized anxiety, can be obsessive compulsive disorder, or panic attacks. A lot of times I have kids that present in my clinic that look like asthma attacks. You can have post-traumatic stress. And sometimes this can be from something as simple as, my second daughter has post-traumatic stress that she still struggles with anxiety, stemming from a hospitalization that she had for extreme dehydration when she was 5 years old. It was at Christmas, and if we're in a medical environment at Christmas time, it will trigger feelings of anxiety, and so sometimes that can happen. Or social phobias. So let's talk about when to worry. Anytime you find self-harm, suicidal ideation, if there's threats of harming others or harming themselves, or if a child tells you that they're being abused in some way, that's always an emergency. That's always either a call to 911 if there's threats of suicide or harming others, or a call to your healthcare provider or law enforcement, depending on what it is. But if there's any of these things on here, then you need to get a hold of somebody right now in this moment. Don't even wait 5 minutes. You need to be on the phone and be trying to connect to services. It's urgent if it's affecting your quality of life. Most of the time, when I see parents come in for mental health issues, it's been going on for a really long time. But if this is affecting your family's ability to function, your child's ability to function, if they're not enjoying their activities, if they're not able to go to school and focus, and it's very anxiety producing or emotional, that's something that's urgent, and you need to get that seen right away. Now, let me give you an example of how we see stigma and bias here. If the teacher called and told you that your child is having trouble seeing the board, that they're squinting and they're having headaches and their grades are going down a little bit, probably what you would do would be immediately get on the phone and call the optometrist and make an appointment. And if they say your child is nearsighted and needs glasses, you would say, okay, great, let's pick out some that are cute, that make you feel, that are trendy, that you can like to wear and post on TikTok or Snapchat or whatever their social media is. But we don't treat mental health like that. When we have presentations of mental health concerns saying, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling depressed, we don't go to the provider. We think, oh, what is that? Well, maybe I'll just wait it out. Maybe I'll try a different diet. Maybe I'll try my sleeping, arrangements. Maybe I'll go gluten-free. And usually you only come when it's bad. And then when we tell you, this looks like anxiety or depression, you need glasses or you need therapy, a counselor or medication. A lot of families think, oh no, like let's just, not yet, not yet. And so we need to treat mental health just like we treat any other physical illness. So when you're seeking care for mental health, I want to kind of destigmatize this a little bit and let you know that your primary care provider is well trained to be able to help you with this. So if you're concerned about it, you should go. A lot of times it's hard just to pick up the phone and call and say, I think my child is anxious or I think my child is depressed. And so a lot of times that's why it comes through physical complaints. Now, that's really important for us to rule out physical illness, but we take a holistic psychosocial approach. We're going to look at your body, your mind, your spirit, and your emotions, but we're going to look at everything. But it's important to have an open mind. And if we use screening tools called the Patient Health Questionnaire, which is a nine question tool that we use to gauge mental health, or the generalized anxiety screen, that's a 7 question, then do those questions. And if the score is high, have an open mind that maybe this is a mental health issue, and that's okay. A lot of times we can take care of things in primary care, but you may be referred to a specialist, and that can be a psychologist, a counselor, a psychiatrist, a social worker, the behavioral therapist. There's lots of different options out there. But a lot of parents are afraid because they think immediately we're going to say, take medication. But actually, there's behavioral therapy that is very well studied and very effective for children. Cognitive behavioral therapy retrains your brain and gives you some really great tips for parents and for kids that can help you manage anxiety or depression. Sometimes medication is necessary, but I want you to know that there is medication that is both safe and effective for treating mental health concerns in children. There are also complementary alternative therapies. This is more difficult for us to recommend because it's hard to do research on children that's safe. And so most of the time, we can talk through with you and talk through the risks and benefits. And there's some that are very effective and some that we don't know as much about, but we can talk to you about the risks and the benefits. But mostly we want to teach you about resilience. So resilience there's been a lot of studies about resilience, and this is just basically helping your child deal with stress in a healthy way. If they don't deal with it in a healthy way, it actually trains their brain to emit what we call a toxic response, and it makes toxic stress. But if they respond to it in a healthy way, then that can be really predictive for their health in their future. Recognizing their feelings is important, saying, I think you feel sad. I think you feel angry. And sometimes they don't even recognize it. With my kids, I do heart checks a lot, where I'll just say, what's the main emotion you had today? And then they can tell me, and we can work through that. On a scale of 1 to 10, how good are you feeling? And that gives me a number of, how are they? Predictability is really important. We cannot have a Pinterest kind of routine, where we have exactly, reading at 11:12 and recess at 11:15, but just having some predictability, knowing what the day is going to be structured like is really helpful. Kids need exercise. They are sitting in front of screens all day, and if their bodies aren't tired, then it's difficult for them to go to sleep at night, and then that has a cascade of negative effects. Having a bedtime routine is really important. Prioritizing sleep. Teens are doing school in their beds, they're doing socialization in their beds, they're watching movies in their beds, and their bed is a mess and their room is a mess, and that's not a restful place to sleep. And especially if they're looking at their screens, they really should be off their screens for 2 hours before bedtime. Yes, I know that's dramatic. So start with 15 minutes and then gradually make it 30. Family mealtime is so positively correlated with increased grades, decreased risk of substance use, increased mental health. It does not have to be a fancy meal, gourmet meal. It can be having takeout pizza around the table. But at my family, we do the highs and the lows and the where did you goes and the tell me about your day. And everybody will tell their high point and their low point. There's lots of apps and websites that give you conversation starters. Not having phones at the table. These things sound so simple, but it's really hard. And if you think back through your week, we're not as good as we'd like to be on these, and we're searching for answers. But if we would put our energy into here, then it would really make a positive impact. And practicing gratitude is shown to have scientific impacts on boosting your mood and making you feel better. So I want to invite you to listen to my podcast that I have from the National Association of Pediatric Nurse Practitioners. It's called Teen Peds Talks, and it's found anywhere you can find a podcast on Google, Apple, Spotify, Anchor, any of those places. Your teens can help you find it. And it's pediatric nurse practitioners talking, but we have a series going on that launched 2 weeks ago, and it's focusing on mental health. So a lot of those things that I just went through quickly, we take those out and we have 30-minute conversations about it, about sleep, about eating, about exercise, about teen dating violence, about social media, about all things mental health. So I encourage you and invite you to listen in to Teen Peds Talks, and you can hear us and have a backstage view of pediatric healthcare providers talking about how to help your kiddos. So I'm going to spend the last part of our time together talking about online activities and all things social media, because this is really directly correlated to mental health. So much for limiting screen time, right? We have talked for years about trying to limit screen time, but now church is online, school is online, entertainment is online, socialization is online, everything is online. So limiting screen time, not an effective strategy. And it's our connection to social circles, and it's required for school. But really, the internet changed in the Web 2.0, where that is where we have user-generated content now. So it's not just static. We're not just receiving information, we're giving information. That's a benefit and also a risk to kids. But let's just take a step back here and look at life today. We have Facebook with 2.45 billion monthly active users. YouTube, there are 5 billion videos uploaded that are viewed each day, with 300 hours of content uploaded per minute. That's just mind-boggling. 330 million monthly active users on Twitter with 500 million tweets per day. Snapchat, 186 million daily active users, and TikTok, 500 million. The Oxford word of the year in 2009 was unfriend. And so you think about how these vocabulary, just as social distancing has changed our society, this has changed our society even leading up to this. I remember the first time I heard unfriend, the elimination of a friend on social media. We didn't say that, back when I was growing up in the 80s. If you wanted to not be friends, you wouldn't say, okay, I unfriend you. It didn't exist. And then we had the words of the year continuing as refudiate and app, which was from the American Dictionary Society, GIF, which my husband still says GIF. Sorry, honey, if you're out there. Selfie, the first time I told him about selfie, he thought I was joking. He really probably took 2 or 3 days to think, no, that's really a thing. But listen, teens spend an average of 9 to 12 hours per week taking selfies. It's like a part time job. And we even have a folder in our phone for it, right? That holds all of our selfies there. 75% of the photos posted on Snapchat are selfies. And so this is a pastime for teens. In 2014, we had vape. In 2014, we had this little gem as the word of the year. And if you're frantically searching the screen to find the word, there is no word. The word of the year was an emoji. And my teens will do this, sit on the couch next to each other and talk in emoji because you can't speak in emoji. This is the crying, a laughing face with tears. If you go to your iPhone, if you have one, and look at your frequently used emojis, most of you are going to have this one in the upper left-hand corner as your most frequently used emoji. The word of the year continuing is post-truth, fake news, youthquake, toxic, climate emergency, justice. These are the things that our children are growing up in the shadow of. And you think about, when was the iPad introduced? Kind of think in your head. Do you think it was 2000, 2005, 10, 15? Well, really, you'll probably be surprised to realize that the iPad was introduced in 2010, which is just amazing to think about how that has changed our lives. And I remember going to one of my children's kindergarten parties at school, and I walked in and there were decorations and individually, sugar glazed cookies that were monogrammed. And I remember thinking, this kindergarten party is nicer than my wedding reception. What happened to, carcinogenic cookies and punch that we got when we were growing up? And we're growing up as parents in the shadow of that as well. A lot of parents will tell me, my kid doesn't have a smartphone, but we know that research is pretty conclusive that about 95% of kids in the US have access to a smartphone. So kids that don't have social media, or that do have social media and do have a smartphone, think that it's the meanest and most cruelest, unusual punishment in the world to not have a smartphone. So a lot of times they'll give a child an old phone or allow them to use and access social media on their phone or on their computer. About 75%, I'm sure is no surprise to you, of kids will admit to hiding online activities. We all hid things when we were growing up, but they didn't live in digital infamy like they do now. And kids, this is just kind of a growing up thing. This is an app called Calculator Plus that looks like a calculator, but that's really your password, and it's a secret file sharing system that's there. So teens are going to hide. I see a lot of people, parents, that will say, oh, that wouldn't happen to my kid, but it can and it does. Kids have Finsta accounts, fake Insta or close friends Instagram, where they'll have like their, kind of, this is what I want the world to see, and this is my goofball self that only my close friends will see, where they're a little more relaxed and post in a more unguarded way. And really, the most concerning thing is that only about 61% of kids use privacy settings on their social media. I ask this routinely in my clinic, and most of the time I get a deer in the headlights look that says, what does that mean? Because to them, everything is public consumption, but their profile should be set to private, and I'll show you that in just a minute. So we have a disconnected society. 85% of us use our phones while we're waiting, 82% while multitasking, 71% of us while working, 69% of us, it's the first thing we pick up in the morning and the last thing that we put down at night. Many of you are going to say, yeah, but I use it for my alarm. Well, okay, we'll go with that. And sometimes we feel like this, like no time to explain, get in the van. We're like, we don't understand it. And you think about social media in itself is not a bad thing, just like a car is not a bad thing. But we wouldn't give the keys of a car to a 12-year-old and say, now be careful, don't do anything stupid, be responsible. We wouldn't do that, but that's what we do with social media. We give our kids the keys without any training. Here's your little guilt trip for the day. I wish I was their phone so they would hold me and look at me all day. And I'm guilty of this too. I think we're all guilty of this. How many of you have been a sports game, where you see all heads down and not looking at life that's happening right in front of us? Or how many times have I gotten my kids together for a picture? Stop touching her, stop touching him, stand still, smile. And then you put it on social media and, oh, these are my little darlings, hashtag mom life. We create this world that's just not there. The one question every parent used to hear is, when can I get a Snapchat? The new question is, when can I get a TikTok? And so I'm going to answer that very simply here. There actually is no social media platform approved for use in the United States under age 13. So if they're not 13, they should not be using social media at all, period, end of story. If you check the box that says, I'm 13, you've violated the terms of use and voided any protection that's available to you for legal protection. And most of the time I see parents that say, I trust my kid. And that's great. You shouldn't trust the people that are around them, because there are bad actors on social media. And again, if they're not 13, it shouldn't even be a question until they're 13. And then 13, start talking about it. One of the best parenting tips I can give you is that if you have more than one child, like I do, not everybody gets social media at the same age. My kids have all gotten phones at different age. One of them, who shall remain nameless, might be 42 by the time they get a phone, because they just each have different challenges and different needs, and it's important for us to meet those needs. It is important to know that kids do have a permanent digital footprint. This is permanent and searchable. And you need to think about that as parents as you're creating your child's digital footprint. Many children will get to the age of 18 and realize they have a lifetime of naked baby pictures, or parent rants saying, I can't stand my kid, they drive me crazy. Does anybody else's kid driving them crazy? And we need to be thoughtful about that. I do ask my children permission to post something about them on social media. And I try to be thoughtful and a good custodian, a steward of their digital footprint. I've sat on the admissions board for multiple colleges, for multiple universities. I assure you, we do look at social media. And I have had students who have gotten in trouble. One particularly at that time where we were having trouble with it at one university which I was teaching, I actually called roll using their profile picture, which is public and searchable. And you can imagine how it would feel in a college class to have your picture as, your bikini picture from vacation, or your, you've had too much to drink on a Friday night. But we have to recognize that, especially for me, I'm in nursing. So our patients a lot of times will look us up on social media and see those kinds of things. And we have to be cognizant of what we present to the public. I'm not saying that, things shouldn't be posted, that you shouldn't post vacation pictures. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying you should be cognizant of what's public and what's private. I've seen kids lose their scholarships over things posted on social media, even things that seem relatively minor. And coaches and recruiters look at this, employers, and they can have identity theft. Now, I'm not a social media hater. There are benefits to social media. They can build friendships. You can get education. You can contribute to an online community. You can be a good digital citizen, and you can have budding entrepreneurs. But there are risks. There are physical dangers. Death by selfie is now a code that I can use in diagnosis. And I have seen this happen. I was actually in Vancouver when a popular YouTuber tragically died by falling while trying to get a selfie. And we have cyberbullying, human trafficking, and sexting, which I'm going to go over really quickly here in the next few minutes. Let me give you some really practical tips here before you get too nervous. If you do these tips, then your child is going to be infinitely more safe on social media than before. Their profiles should all be set to private. Their profile photos should be stock photos. That means a bunny, a beach, a flower, something that doesn't say, I'm a 14-year-old insecure teenager that wants more followers. Don't friend someone you don't know. This is so common, so common, because they think, oh, well, it's so-and-so's friend, so that's my friend. Don't post your birth date. Don't post your school name. Disable geotagging on photos. Every photo you take on your iPhone has an exact coordinate of latitude and longitude. And I have seen children who are preyed upon and groomed into really dangerous situations by following their geotags. And never agree to meet a stranger. Let's talk a little bit about sexting. Yes, we are going to get right in there. So if you have younger children, you may want to send them out of the room for a minute. But this is a question that your teenagers will either get or they will see their friends get. It is very common. But what we see here is a cultural divide. We're giving them mixed messages, which is really difficult. On the one hand, we're telling them this is a normal part of a dating relationship. And on the other hand, we're saying you can go to jail for this. So if you look at this example from Teen Vogue, here's the headline here: How to Sext, the Best Tips and Tricks. And then we see everybody's doing it, which is not the case and not the truth. But if we look at the most recent research, we know that 1 in 4 teens have received a sext. And the definition of sext is pretty loose. It just means basically a sensual or a sensual image. 1 in 7 have sent them. 1 in 8 have received an image without consent of the sender. That means somebody took it of somebody else and gave it out. This is trending upward and younger, and we have tweens 10 to 12 that are most vulnerable. A lot of times this may be older teens that groom them into it, or sometimes somebody that's pretending to be somebody that they're not. But they may send a suggestive picture, and then all of a sudden they get immediate feedback that says, oh my gosh, you're beautiful, you're handsome, you're amazing, I can't believe that. And then the photos will get more suggestive until usually what I see happens is that then they are in a blackmail or sextortion situation where they'll say, give me more, or I'm going to post these. And that's called revenge porn. And that's something that our teens are really dealing with. Teens have false assumptions of security. They think Snapchat disappears. So they think if they say it disappears, then it disappears, right? So they don't understand things like screenshots or taking a picture with another phone. Or other ways that you can take images that will last forever. So it's really important for them to know to have a realistic expectation of their risk. You also need to know that for publicly generated posts, 88% of self-generated content has a third-party host. That means there's a data mine out there that's taking all of these pictures that we're posting, taking your content, and they host it on another site for anybody to have. And so again, that's important for digital footprints. And the other thing that can happen is snappening. And you may think, what is snappening? Is it a type of turtle, a new dance move, a social media photo leak, or I have no idea. It actually is a social media photo leak. So sometimes people can hack into your phone. This happened to Jennifer Lawrence, star of the Hunger Games, would probably be one of the most high profile pictures. But a lot of times teens send something in what they think is consensual, but then those images are shared later, an average of at least 9 times. I'm going to go over the law in Texas here. This is the law on sexting. The first offense is a Class C misdemeanor. There are some exceptions and a $500 fine. The second offense is a Class B misdemeanor and up to 180 days in county jail with up to a $2,000 fine. There's a harsher punishment for malicious intent for harassment for threat of harm. And you think, oh, this is adults. Sometimes it is adults. Sometimes it's 15 and 16-year-old kids. Sometimes it's girls, sometimes it's boys, and they don't recognize the gravity of what they're doing. If they're adults, this is a felony, and parents have to appear in court with the teens. Now, the protections are if the images were only of the recipient and the sender, and the images were sent in the context of a dating relationship, and both parties are no more than 2 years apart in age, including if one party is 18, that would be like 18 and 16. Then there may be some exceptions. That's a lot of ands, and that's a lot of exceptions. And so some of you, think like, I don't know, I don't want to talk to your kids about this, but it's important because they're talking about it at school. They know people, they know friends that have experienced this, that have been asked to deal with this. And a lot of times they are not talking about it, but we need to talk about it. And so it's important to ask, what do you think about sexting? Have you experienced this at all? And I'll go over some more details about that. This is Amanda Todd's story. You can look up her story on YouTube. Amanda Todd really is one of those that I talked about, how she was basically tricked into sexting, and then those pictures were shared, and she spiraled down into a spiral that we see. They feel shame, then they're bullied, then they feel isolated. They experience post-traumatic stress disorder. They experience self-harm. They have substance abuse to dull that pain, and then suicidal ideation. And unfortunately, Amanda Todd is one who took her own life over the things that emerged from sexting, which is really just absolutely tragic. The same things can happen with cyberbullying. Cyberbullying is usually repeated, it's willful, and it's across platforms. It can happen on computers, cell phones, other electronic devices. It doesn't always have to be on social media. It can be texting, it could be phone calls, but there are state laws that govern cyberbullying as well. And I actually just recorded a Team of Peds Talk episode this morning that will be airing soon. That is an hour-long discussion on cyberbullying. So I'll leave you with that teaser there. This is Megan Meyer. I met her mother, Tina, at a conference. And Megan was cyberbullied. She was harassed online. She was told she was fat, and it got really abusive. Her parents actually decided to move schools, and she maintained a little bit of a social media presence with some of the kids from her other school. And one of the boys that she didn't know said, "Hey, I'm so sorry. I heard about what happened to you. This is awful." And they had a relationship that Megan's parents were monitoring, but gradually the relationship turned more negative. And I think they were right and said awful things. And you can actually go to the Megan Meyer Foundation and watch her full story. But it ended with saying the world would be better off without you. And Megan, at 12 years old, took her own life at her home when her mom was there. It turns out that that boy was not even real. It was a catfishing episode where it was the girls who had been bullying her, who made up another persona, and were posting her private comments for just the purposes of harassment. Now, I'm sure those girls did not even imagine that this would happen in this way, but there were no laws to protect her. So this is important for us to talk to kids because they don't recognize the gravity of their actions. There's a victim, but there's also a perpetrator, and perpetrators are also kids who are hurting. If this happens, if you don't hear me say anything else, if your child discloses to you something that they've done online or that they've experienced, whether that's sexting or cyberbullying or anything else, the most important thing that you can stop and say in that moment is, "I'm so sorry you've had this experience. I'm so sorry this has happened to you." Because our reaction as parents is almost always to say, "How could you do this? How could you be so stupid? What have you done?" And they know that. And especially if they're disclosing to you, they're distressed. And there are going to be consequences, and there are going to be issues that you have to work out. And there are going to probably be restrictions and boundaries in place. But in that moment, meeting their trauma can really mean the difference between life and death. So it's important if you're in these situations to consult legal counsel. A lot of these issues do rise to the occasion of consulting a lawyer, and I would encourage you to do that. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has great resources. The key phrase in there is exploited children. It's not just for the milk carton, but they have that. But facing the future honestly and connecting these kids to counseling is really important. Other scary things I see are Facebook depression. This is a diagnostic term that was coined by the American Academy of Pediatrics. I see kids with neck pain and strain from looking down so much. Sleep deprivation, such a big thing. Have a podcast all about sleep, poor school performance, and then pornography, which we haven't even gotten to talk about yet, but we will be talking about on the podcast. You can go to fightthenewdrug.org to see the health risks associated with that. Other risks are apps that allow anonymous users. So these apps are preferred by pedophiles looking at the since the pandemic, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has reported that reports of exploitation and sexting and abuse have risen by more than 300%. They're 3 times what they were. 70% of those come from Messenger, from social media, which Facebook Messenger is working to go to a encrypted platform. And so that will relieve the social media provider of having to report. So we anticipate that exploitation will go up while reports go down. And online gaming. I was speaking to a group of 8th graders last year, and one of the 8th graders told me about a person who had asked them to do some obscene things in gaming. And I said, "Did you tell your parents?" He said, "Oh, of course not, because what would happen? They would not be able to play again." Human trafficking is a very real and present danger, and social media is the primary way that traffickers are meeting and recruiting their victims and building relationships. There's not time to go into that here, but if you go to napnappartners.org, snapnappartners.org. There is a talk that's posted there for free for healthcare providers. And it's mainly for healthcare providers, but it's very good information for teachers or parents or anyone else. And so I would encourage you to go to that, and you can listen to the talk about human trafficking and how that intersects here. The other trainings that are available for more information specifically about human trafficking are Unbound Houston. If you go to unboundhouston.org, we have specific trainings for parents and caregivers. They're on demand, so you can just sign up and view a recording, or you can join one live. They're in English and Spanish. We have one for healthcare professionals, which is the same one that's posted on napnap.org. We have ones for students that are grade appropriate. We have ones for school nurses and for school personnel and school personnel extended. And Unbound is all over the state of Texas, and we have trained many, many school districts. So if you're interested in having us come and talk to your school, whether that's the students or the personnel, we would love to do that. This is a help in crisis at crisistextline.org. You can text this number to anywhere and be trained with a crisis counselor. So if you're a teacher, or even if you're a parent, I would give this number out or post it somewhere where the kids can see it. And I even have it in my house when kids come in, so that they can have access to that. Now you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, I want to run away. This is all depressing and horrible. Let's just go off the grid, which most of Texas did last week, and we saw how that went. Or maybe this is more your era. Let's just turn back time and go to the good old days. But listen, it's all about relationships. That is the most important thing. A lot of parents will ask me about monitoring software, which those are important tools. Checking your child's phone is important, but it's all about relationships. So you have to start by being a good digital citizen yourself. Are you having healthy boundaries with your smartphone and social media? My youngest son told me that Facebook is just Fortnite for adults. So are we setting good boundaries? Are we being responsible in what we post? Are we setting tech-free zones and tech-free hours? Our tech-free zones are the dinner table in the car. Because in the car, we're all together and we have the opportunity to talk, and we don't have our phones at the dinner table. Sometimes we'll have tech-free Tuesdays. Doing basic safety checks, whether that's monitoring software or looking at their phone, realizing that they're always going to find a way to outsmart you if they want to, and that relationship piece is most important. It is okay to reset boundaries. Maybe you're thinking, oh my gosh, I have messed everything up. I've done everything wrong. It is perfectly fine to go back to your child and say, I have some new information that's going to help me be a stronger parent, and it's going to help you be safer and healthier. It's perfectly fine to say that. Have intentional conversations. And Pinterest is a great way to start because you can see what your kid likes, and it's kind of a low stakes conversation starter. This is the model that I have developed and used and advocate for you to use with your kids. It's very simple. It's listen with your face. So when you're talking to your kids, you want to look at your face. Don't have your face in your phone and say, yeah, I'm listening, I'm listening. Let's be honest, if you're on a date and your date is doing that, it's really annoying and rude. And it's annoying and rude when we do that to our kids. So make sure you're listening with your face. Offer them open-ended questions. So many times with kids, we just want to tell them what to do. You need to do this, you need to do that. But we need to ask open-ended questions. How are you feeling about that? Tell me more about what you think. And validate their feelings. So even if you think their feelings are ridiculous and completely unjustified, you can validate it. So if you're saying, I'm so sorry you're upset about this, that says nothing about whether it was right or wrong. It's just saying, I'm sorry you're feeling upset in the moment. And then explore next steps together. So don't tell your teen, especially, what to do. Even younger kids should have a say in, having a family meeting to decide where's going to be our tech-free zones, where will be our tech-free times. Those are important. You can find me just to show you, I am not a anti-social media. I use it, and it's a very effective tool for me to reach families and other nurses. You can find me on Twitter at Dr. Peck PNP. My focus there is child advocacy. On Facebook, I'm at Dr. Peck PNP, and my focus is news for nurses. And then Instagram, this is brand new to me, so my teens are teaching me all how to use this. You can find me at Dr. Nurse Mama with periods between the words. And my focus there is to equip and encourage moms and families as well. You'll find information about my podcast and questions and talking really to parents and families. So I want to thank you very much for your time. I'm going to stop my share here so that I can see everybody again. And with that, if you want to put your questions in the chat box. I think that Dr. Foyt's is going to come back on and is going to let me know what questions you have that I can try to answer.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was extremely informative. Um, so we have two questions right now for you. The first question is from Emily Smart, and her question is, what conversation starters would you recommend for younger kiddos who don't yet know exactly how to express their feelings? And she's qualifying that as early elementary school age.
Absolutely, Emily. Thank you for that question. And that is really important. That's a really difficult thing to do. But I think just how are you feeling is a really great place to start. Just how are you feeling? And many times they can't say that. They can't articulate that to you. So helping them figure it out and helping them narrow that down is really important. How are you feeling about this? Or ask, what are you thinking? And a lot of times, it's interesting to see what they're telling you they'll think. Another great way to talk to kids that age is to ask them to draw you a picture. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and I am amazed at. I've used this through all my kids growing up, and many times when they'll draw me a picture, I'll see something come out that I'll say, "What is this?" and tell me about this. And kids love to brag to you about their artwork and to see you do everything, and so they'll explain every little detail. And a lot of times, that's a natural conversation starter.
All right, thank you. And then another question we have is, as a parent, what is the best way to monitor for cyberbullying?
Great question. So again, I get this question a lot in thinking about software, which there's a lot of software out there that can help you to see what's going on in your child's social media. As I said, the main thing is relationships and asking just the simple question of, do you feel safe when you go online? I ask this question all the time to kids in my clinic, and I'm amazed at how many say, well, they may say something like, it's crazy or it's drama, or they may say, something to that effect, but it can spark further conversation. And so just, at offering an open door is really important. And I use this line all the time. Some kids, and so you're not putting too much pressure on them, but I could say, some kids, I've seen other moms talk about it, or if you see a story about it, you can give it to them and say, some kids seem to be experiencing this. Have you experienced this? Have your friends experienced this? Or some kids, I see have mean people say mean things online. And knowing that they can have an open door, because a lot of times kids will feel like they invited that on themselves. And that's just not the truth. And so saying, this is not your fault. You can come and talk to me about this. I won't be angry. There may be consequences, but we can work through this. I think just giving that open door and having, conversation when it comes up in line, especially popular culture, that's a really helpful tool, because your kids are following these celebrities on Instagram. So find out which celebrities they're following. And if something comes up, say, hey, I saw that, whichever celebrity they're following said something today about this. What did you think about that? And they'll be like, oh my gosh, you know about that? You don't know. And then you can let them teach you. Let them be the expert. That's a really helpful way to get conversation going.
Super. And then Julie Fisher is asking, is there a way we can get a copy of the slideshow?
Yes, this is going to be recorded, and so the links will be available, and you'll have the slides as part of that. And if you want to email me, you can find me at jessica_peck@baylor.edu.
All righty, thank you. And then Nicole is asking, how can you help a 4-year-old cope with the death of a loved one, especially in the case where that child fully understands the concept of death and where they fully appreciate that they will never see that person again?
Oh, Nicole, that is such a heartbreaking question. And if that's something that your family has experienced, just please know that all the thoughts and prayers and just hugs are going out to you, because that's something that a lot of families are experiencing across the country, and it's very difficult. It's interesting to see how children process death by age group. Preschoolers are much different than school age children that are teenagers. And actually, teenagers are the ones that have the hardest time processing death. So for a 4-year-old, they are very resilient and they can learn to process it in time. But it is, they don't recognize that it's permanent. That's very difficult for them to recognize. And so it's hard for them to realize that. And then once they realize that, then they start to have separation anxiety, like, well, if they disappeared and they're gone forever, are you going to be gone forever? So lots of reassurance is really important, acknowledging their feelings, just saying, yes, I know you feel sad that we're never going to see this person again. And helping them process it in different ways according to their personalities is really helpful, whether that's having a picture and talking about that person, talking about their memories, drawing pictures, and celebrating those memories that you had, those good times. Especially at 4, they may not remember that later on. So those pictures or those letters or those conversations that you record will be really important for them as they go to be a teenager and they're maybe processing it in a different way. Then that can be a good thing to have. If your 4-year-old is very clingy, is having trouble sleeping, is having trouble eating, is having severe anxiety, then that would be something I would talk to your healthcare provider about, because those can be signs of just unhealthy coping and coping mechanisms. So that can be there, but mainly just all the snuggles, listening to them, validating their feelings, and just patient explanations. Just that you've explained this a million times and you'll explain it a million more. That goes really, really far.
Okay. Thank you. And that's all that we have for, oh, hold it. We have a few more that have just come in.
Okay.
Uh, Here we go. From Cindy, and I apologize if I don't pronounce her last name right, but I think it's Altenberg. How can you help manage developing social activities from being in isolation for so long, and in parentheses, i.e. virtual learning?
Cindy, that's a great question. It's good to see you on this webinar here. I don't know if you're talking about adults or students, because we all can have that for sure with social anxiety. And that is difficult because on Zoom, it's a completely different social environment than it is, in person. You can't interpret body cues and body language like we usually can. And so then going back out into the real world can be scary. And we see that, recent research that I saw said that 40% of teens will use their phone to avoid social interaction. And so that can be difficult. So I think, trying to plan things in ways that are safe is really important. I know with my daughter, we have a friend that lives next door, and we planned an outdoor camping for them. They had socially distanced tents, and their big brother made s'mores. And, they were still wearing masks, and this was earlier in the pandemic, and they each had their own bathroom to go to, but it made all the difference in the world. So I don't think it has to be, something really big, but it's just planning intentionally those social situations and then providing support through those. One of my children struggled with social anxiety, and so we would stay after church and practice just saying hello to everybody. And so we would practice going up and say, "Good morning, Mr. So-and-so, how are you?" And even that was just such a big barrier. But, then we would celebrate by, getting their favorite food and saying, "Yay, we did it." So I think just start small and be intentional about it, and give lots of support and positive feedback, especially when they come back feeling defeated or frustrated. Just help them to recognize it's okay, that's fine, and we'll get there again.
Okay. So another attendee is asking, with COVID, many people have been at home for a year with their kids. My child is an only child and is doing very well in school, but definitely does a lot more screen time because I need to work. When do we worry that it has gone too far?
Good question, and tough, 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 because yes, a lot of us, we are working from home and we have to, put food on the table and make a paycheck to do that. And so it is hard. So the first thing that I would say would be to cut out any mommy guilt you have about that, because sometimes we just have to do things like that. And that's just the way that it is. I've had my children, pushing their faces up to my glass door here and, putting signs up, "Can I make toast?" which my students saw, which was particularly lovely. So sometimes that's just the way that it is. And so I think being intentional in the times that you can be present is really important. So making sure that, you have designated times where you turn off your computer, where you set down your phone, where you're playing a board game, where you're watching a show together, where you're taking a walk around your neighborhood and you are listening with your face is important. But when it's gone too far is if your child is showing symptoms of anxiety. That would be difficulty sleeping, difficulty eating, if they are just extremely emotionally upset about the thought of social interaction, if they're not wanting to do the activities that they usually do, those are all signs to say that this has gone too far and you need to talk to your primary care provider about what would be appropriate interventions, which there are many that we could provide.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question. I think, is this okay for our last question? So this is from Ashley Kate Hughes. What is your take on being part of your child's social media? For example, there are apps out there that allow for a parent monitoring of each conversation. Do you feel like that is an invasion of privacy or a good way to make sure your child is safe? That way they are not missing out on social media, but can be safe while using it.
Hi, Ashley. It's so good to see you and great question. So, I have an opinion on this. It is not necessarily evidence based, but just from my professional and personal framework, I think it's absolutely fine for you to be in their social media. Now, having said that, it's really important to have conversations with your children about respectful boundaries because I don't think that you want them, trolling your social media either. And there are some famous celebrity examples of that, like Rob Lowe's son is famous for trolling his dad, and he does so pretty brilliantly. And so, having a conversation about those respectful boundaries is important. They shouldn't be posting anything that you don't want to see, but at the same time, you don't want to be commenting on every little post saying, "Oh yes, this is my sweet little baby, and look at this, and I'm so proud of you," and so just be respectful of that. But I definitely think the important point here is that if your child is using a social media platform, you should be using that too. Because just as I told you when we're learning to drive, we learn things from that. You learn things from using social media that you don't know before. So, for example, when I first started using Instagram, I didn't realize you get pornographic friend requests. There can be pictures that are on there. It's very easy to access inappropriate material. Now, do I think that my children would intentionally go and find that? I don't think so, and I hope not. But what do they do if they come across it accidentally? I want them to feel like they can come to me and talk to me about it without feeling like they're in trouble. And so you can just see, like, oh, hey, here's this pitfall. I didn't realize this was public. Did you realize, that so and so saw this or that kind of thing? And you can help and guide them. But I think the important thing is, especially with your teenagers, to have that conversation, to have respectful boundaries on what's okay to post and what's not okay to post, and then just be respectful of each other. Thanks for that question. And thank you for all of your questions. I really appreciate the engagement, and and I appreciate most of all the fact that you're on here means that you love kids in your life and you're wanting to do what you can to keep them healthy and safe. And that is a rare treasure in this in this world. We really appreciate everybody who is doing their part to try to increase the health and safety of children.
All right, and thank you, Dr. Jessica Peck, for chatting with all of us today, and thank you for all of our attendees. It was a very informative session.